Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're happy to have you. Um, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Zeke Becerra, and I'm the Regional Sales Manager of the Americas. I'm your host today, and I'll be introducing the star of the show here in a couple of slides. Today, we're going to explain what our solution, Dbvisit Standby, is, review its architecture, components, highlight some of the top features. We'll definitely talk about the automatic failover feature in some detail, and then we will show the demo, which is what a lot of people came here for. We'll then talk about support and then discuss some next steps if you like what you see. And if there's time at the end, we will answer questions. So if you have a question, please just put it in the box in the GoToWebinar control panel. So that said, I'd like to introduce Charmaine Bezuidenhout. She's our product and pre-sales specialist based in Auckland. So it is early morning for her. How are you doing this morning, Charmaine?
I'm up and about and happy to be here. Thank you, Zeke.
Great. The floor is yours.
Lovely, great stuff. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this live webinar. And I have the privilege of taking you through what our awesome product can do for you in the DR for Oracle Standard Edition space. So first of all, we want to look at what Dbvisit is and what it can do for you. So first of all, it is really fast Oracle DR at a low cost. It's a full life cycle DR also for standard edition. You've got a standby database ready to go 24/7. With so much cloud talk these days, we are 100% cloud ready. AWS, Oracle, Azure, the choice of environment is yours, on-premise, cloud, hybrid. We pride ourselves in that we have this GUI or central console, which makes the management of complex environments so much easier. So this is really a tool designed and supported by DBAs for DBAs and their managers. And the flexibility of the control you have makes it just that more easier to use and absolute must-have. Okay, so let's quickly go over the architecture of Dbvisit Standby. So you're going to come in as a user through the central console, which is usually, either on a little VM somewhere, or if you don't have a separate VM for it, you can have it running off your standby host. This is just an installation and starting of a process. So what then happens is you connect to a DBV agent on each of your sites or your hosts. So you're going to have a little agent, and this agent is connecting your central console to the core. So you're also going to have the core installed. And then there's another component called DBVNet, and that's our network component, which will take care of the sending and applying of the logs. So all in all, fairly easy if you look at it at a, in a component point of view. Now I'm going to explain each of these a little bit more. So your core is your command line interface, and this contains all, the major operations and tasks that the product is capable of. This is where the magic happens under the hood, okay? Then we've got DBVNet, which is the network communication component, and it is responsible for copying files and executing remote commands. It runs on default port 7890, and all the traffic or everything that gets copied or executed is encrypted by default. Then we've got the agent, and as mentioned earlier, it's the gateway between the central console and the core. You have to have one on each server running on default port 7891 if you want to make use of the central console. It has a small little SQLite repository, not holding critical data. It just keeps track of the requests that comes from the central console onto the core. And then DBV server, which is our GUI or central console, is used to manage multiple configurations. It makes use of HTTPS, so it's secure, and it uses default port 4433. Again, small little SQLite repository, just keeping track of all the operations that are initiated through the central console. And through the central console, you can perform core functions, and this is where the beauty of the product comes in. So let's talk about a couple of top features. We've got multi-language support that came in from version 9. We are able to handle ASM to file system, so we can mix it up. You don't have to have ASM to ASM or file system to file system databases. We have rack to single. We are NFS compatible. Specifically here, talking about transportable media when you've got huge databases and you don't have the space or capacity to make a backup on local storage, and if you don't have the network capability of transferring that over the network. We've got Cascade Standby databases, meaning a standby of a standby, which can be used for reporting purposes. You monitor and manage your configurations through a very slick looking GUI central console. You can schedule your sending and applying of the logs through a daemon process, which will take care of it within the product. You can do Graceful Switchover, which is in effect role reversal for planned maintenance. We've got a user quick guide, step-by-step help, which will help you, if you're new to the product, take you through an interactive step-by-step configuration of the main operations. We also have support packages for faster problem resolution, and I'll also show you later on how that works. Then my personal favorite, the expansion on this database, standby database activation, and specifically the DR test. There's a lot of work that went into this, and I think this is making life so much easier for the DBA. And of course, our much spoken about automatic failover feature that came in with version 9.0.02. So a little bit more about the automatic failover. First of all, this is a component that you will install additionally, and what it will do is it will monitor the health of your primary database based on certain rules and priorities that you've set. If it finds that it cannot communicate or connect to the primary based on those rules, it will start with the automatic failover process. So it is an awesome tool to help you, so you don't have to go and actually push the button to say activate now, but it will do this based on the rules for you, so bringing in the automatic failover capability. It is, however, very important that you do test this, and that's why we've got two modes. We've got a manual mode and a failover mode. The thing is, when you do test this, you don't want to set up or set off false alarms doing activations if nothing is wrong with your primary. So you have this for testing. It is managed through the GUI, and it uses the component called the observer. So the observer is sitting there and it is keeping an eye on your primary. Then there's also a couple of advanced settings that you can make use of within that. For email notification, you can add user scripts with exit codes, based on the checks it must do for you additionally. And then lastly, you've got some rule priorities saying that if this and this and this is these criteria are met, then please proceed with an automatic failover. So that's just the rules that I'm referring to. Just high level also, the automatic failover architecture, you can see that it runs on the same host as your central console. The reason is you are managing the observer through the central console. So they need to be able to talk to each other, and thus it makes sense to have them on the same host. And then, of course, the observer also goes through the DBV agent because it needs to get to the core to talk, so that it knows when activation needs to take place. So that is just in short, and you'll see once I configure it how it actually works within the product. Okay, and then we get to the actual live demo, and let me just minimize this and get it out of the way, and voila, there you go. I'm just going to see if I can make my screen a bit bigger. So once you've installed Dbvisit Standby and the components, this is the screen that you'll get in your browser to access the central console. Now, I want to highlight the fact that make sure that you read the user guide and pay close attention to the prerequisites. If you follow the prerequisites and look at all the connectivity requirements, etc., you get that right, the rest of it will be a breeze. So at this stage, I've got three hosts running. So I've got my primary and my standby, and then I've got a third little host where I've got the central console and the observer installed and running. So one of the first features that I mentioned earlier is the multi-language support. And before we log in, you can have a look at this drop-down list and you can see the different languages. So you can, make your choice, seeing that we're in the Americas, let's use Espanol. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like. Just close there. So you can see that you get your descriptions based on the language that you've requested. So this is quite a nice view for you, and it helps with your configuration. Okay, but let me rather go back to English, which I understand and will be able to use to show you the rest of the tool. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, this is the page that you will see when you do your configurations, your maintenance, your monitoring, etc. So first of all, you'll see that some of these options are disabled because you're first going to have to do certain things before it opens up so you can do other things. Otherwise, you know how people are, they are inquisitive and they start jumping the gun and then things go horribly wrong, etc. So first of all, we are going to introduce our primary and our standby hosts to the product. And we do that by clicking on the Manage Host page. And here we will now add our primary and standby host information. So my primary is DBV1. I've got a little passphrase that was entered during the installation, and it picks up that it's Linux. Remember, this also runs on Windows, so you are welcome to set it up on Windows as well. Then I'm going to add DBV2, which is my standby host. Also, it picks up its Linux. And there you've got it. It also shows that it can connect, and it uses this port. Remember the port that I was talking about, 7891, that is for DBV agent. So it's making sure that through the GUI we can connect to the core. Okay. Then you see that this manage configurations option becomes available. So now we can go over and we can actually create our configuration. Now, if you look at the screen, people would want to go, oh, I want to do something here because it's first in line. This is the observer. However, you cannot set up an observer if you don't have an existing configuration. It makes sense. The observer will monitor your existing setup, or a primary standby setup, and if it finds that there's something wrong with the primary, it will act upon it. So we've got nothing here yet, so we cannot set up the observer yet. So we will come back to this later on. At this stage, we want to create a new configuration, meaning a new pair, primary and standby. So I'm going to choose my primary host, which we call the source. I'm going to accept the license agreement. It then picks up the list of databases from the Aura tab, and I choose the database that I want to create a standby database for. There's a couple of other options that you can follow through in the user guide. You can see that it picks up the network communications port. If you don't want to use this network communications component, you can always still use SSH. You'll just have to indicate yes, you want to use it. Then I'm choosing my standby host that picks up the Oracle SID from the database or instance that it picked up from the primary side, and then it gives it a configuration name. This configuration name can be anything else. Make it descriptive. We usually say keep it the same as the primary name. You know, it just makes sense because that will give you a good description as to what this is for. Then I'm going to add a license key, and I'm going to say submit. So this is all good and nice, because the thing is, going forward, we are going to make use of this configuration, so we don't have to type in host names and database names and Oracle home directories and stuff, because it all is contained within this configuration. So you can see that I've got a configuration. The status is it's ready, and you can actually go and change parameters within the configuration, and you can actually go and submit it there. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like. Okay, so we've got a configuration, and now we are ready to go over, and you see it opened up the rest of all of these options. So now we are ready to go and create a standby database. When we click on that option, we will now get a couple of options to choose from, and then we are ready to rock and roll. So first of all, we're going to choose our configuration. It now does a couple of checks, making sure it can communicate with all the relevant components. Yes, I want to create a new database. It picks up the Oracle database parameters from the primary, which you can always change if you want to. If your spec on your standby host is smaller, or you don't have as much memory, you can go and actually decrease that. And then we have the option of the locations where you want your RMAN backups to be taken. As mentioned earlier, transportable media option is there for your bigger databases. And then I'm going to hit submit. Now it takes all this information, does a couple of checks in the background, and it opens up a task in this task pane. And if you hover over it, you can see that something is happening here. So then you can actually click on it and it gives you the feedback as to what's happening during this operation. So we are busy creating the standby database. So it is running a pre-flight, it creates a standby control file, it does a calculation of how big the database is, and immediately it starts with backing up the primary database, starting with data file 1. So it's going to back up the database, it's going to transfer those RMAN backup files, and it's going to restore it on the other side. I've got a small little database, so only 4 data files, so it should run through this fairly quickly, and I'll be able to show you, the rest of the operations. Then also, if you don't feel like having this open and looking at this, you can always go and close it, because you can always go back again. So no need to worry if you by accident did click on close. It is there and it's running. It won't go away. So, don't be alarmed and think you've done something wrong. It is all good if you close there. Just quickly, this manage users and update the standby license. Manage users we use for when you've got a bigger team managing different environments. You can always, make sure that you've got separate users with separate privileges, especially when you have to audit people for security purposes, etc. The other one here is updating the standby license. For example, the license key that I've entered was like a trial little license. So if I decide to purchase and I get my my permanent license key, I will just go in here and I will choose my configuration and apply that license. Then I know it is a permanent license. So just to give you an idea as to these two. At this stage, I'm just going to go back. You can see we are almost done with the creation of the standby database. This was fairly quick. And it gives you a good rundown as to the process that was followed. And it gives you a green tick after each of these, so you know exactly where in the process it is. So without further ado, you can see that our task is now completed successfully. And now we're going to spend a little bit of time in this database actions option, as it will give you quite a couple of options that you can use to check and manage and schedule and do certain things. So first of all, once you've created your standby database, your main test to make sure everything is up and running and working as it is supposed to is, first of all, to manually go and send logs. So what I've done is I've clicked on send logs, and it opens a task here once again. If I click on the task, you'll see that it goes, it checks if there's an archive log available. If not, it performs a log switch and it transfers that log sequence 12. Now I need to go and apply the logs. So I click on the operation, it starts a task very quickly, and it goes and it applies that archive log 12. So that's very good. We know that we should be in sync. So now we've got a little thing called the log gap report, and if you click on this, it will provide you the information to prove how in sync you are. So at this stage, the time lag between the standby and the primary is 1 minute, which is awesome. Then just to give you a little bit of, reporting on this, a lot of the time people want to see the time gap over time and see if it has increased, why. Maybe there was more redo generation, maybe there's a bit of slow network, whatever the reason might be. You can actually go and look at the time gap statistics, and this will give you over time how things have, how your time gap have either decreased or increased or whatever, and you can actually zoom in on it. This is specifically, when you look at reporting. Previously, we had a whole option dedicated to reporting. However, it was disabled. So the thinking is to bring reporting in through the various, stages. Okay. The next thing we want to do is to look at database actions. Now, here is where you can actually look at clicking on your standby database. It gives you the status. DBV2 is the standby database in recovery mode, and it gives you options here. So from here, I can actually go and start the standby database in read-only mode. Let's do that. I'd like to show you. There you can see it started it very quickly, and if I go to status now, it shows it's in read-only mode. Awesome. And then I can just go and restart it, and it will put it back into recovery mode. So why would I go and open up a SQL Plus session and then remember all the commands and whatever if I can quickly do it through the central console? Then another very important one is the background processes. And this is where you schedule the process to take care of the sending and applying for you. Previously, or alternatively, you still have the option of making use of cron or your window scheduler. But I'm saying you've got this functionality within the product. Why not use it, with the product, and you isolate stuff so you know that it's within the product. So what you then do is this daemon process will then run on your primary, and it will send the logs that it finds there as soon as it finds one. And then when you start it on the standby, it will again go and apply the logs as soon as it picks it up. So what we can do is I can start it, and you can see it says that it started, and you'll say, but how do I know? Go back, click on it, and you'll see it runs with a PID, and you can actually go and check that process ID out on your operating system, and you'll find that it is running there. By the way, everything I'm showing you here, you can also run through a command line. So if you choose not to make use of the GUI, we've got the full command line interface that you can run this through. So let's start this daemon process on the standby as well. So now you know that the scheduling is taken care of. So you don't have to worry about sending and applying. The product will do it for you. And at any point when you do a log app report, it should show that you are still in sync. Very nifty indeed. Then you've got 3 more options here, and this is in the case of, something going haywire. You can recreate your standby control file, you can refresh one data file, and you can even resend an archive log file. If it didn't come over properly due to a network issue, you can just resend it. So you'll agree with me, this is where quite a bit of the work that you'll be doing, resides. Then next, I would like to quickly just touch on the sync standby feature. Now, we've seen that it happens a lot. A weekend come, something happens, archive logs gets deleted to free up space. People find that those archive logs have never been backed up, and now they sit with this huge gap on Monday, and they like thinking, oh my goodness, we go into panic mode and we decide to rebuild the standby database because we need archive logs, but those were deleted and we don't have backups for it. With this option, it is not necessary. You can, if you've lost archive logs for some reason, or somebody actually went and deleted it because they were in panic mode and had to free up space, or whatever the reason, you can make use of this synchronized standby option, which will take RMAN incremental backup to synchronize your physical standby database with your primary database. So what it does is the backup of the primary will be created, and starting at the current SCN of the standby, and it will then roll forward the standby database forward based on that. So life will be much easier. You don't have to go into panic mode. If you have an archive log gap and you don't have those archive logs available, just choose synchronized standby and you'll be all good to go. And an incremental backup is so much shorter and smaller than a full backup for recreating the whole standby database. Then I quickly want to touch on performing graceful switchover, and this is role reversal, and it's usually done for planned maintenance. You know, people want to reprioritize equipment, they want to do, you know, some software updates, etc. So then we'll do graceful switchover. Note, however, that graceful switchover is disruptive, so it's not as if people can work and they will not be affected by this. This is a planned change, so the database will at some stage go down. First of all, if you want to do graceful switchover, we'll have to go back and we'll have to go and stop our daemons. Otherwise, it's going to complain and say, hey, but you want to do all this weird stuff and I'm still sending and applying archive logs. So let's go and stop our daemon processes. And you'll see in a lot of cases in the documentation, we say make sure that you stop your schedules. And this is the reason, otherwise you're going to get like a red message saying, sorry, we cannot continue. So first of all, let's use our configuration, and it will now give a log gap. I'm fine with a 5-minute time gap. I'm not going to worry about that. If you're not happy, you'll go back and you'll manually send and apply, get it back to 1 minute or whatever your time specification is, and you will submit. Again, it opens up a task here in your task pane, and now it goes through the motions of doing the actual graceful switchover. So it runs some checks, it does some pre-processing, and then it starts working on your primary and on your standby, and it does the necessary to do the converting of that. Again, you can close this if you want to go and check something else in the meantime. You don't have to have this open all the time. So while it's busy doing its processing, you can go and look at other stuff as well. While this is busy, I would like to go and have a look at this user quick guides. So the idea around this is to show you by interactive tour a step-by-step approach how to do certain operations. So if you click on it, you'll see that it's taken like the creation of the host, which I've already done, the creation of the DDC, which is the configuration, the standby database, sending logs, synchronize, and even a graceful switchover. What it does, it takes you through each of these and within it's got a couple of steps. Let's say, for example, you know, let's say we want to create another DDC. If you click on that, it will take you to the option to use. It will give you a nice little description, and you'll see that it is step 1 of 10. So what happens next is you click on this, and then it takes you to the next step, and it says, then if there are any already defined, you can view it, or you can click on new. Sorry, I wanted to sneeze. And so it takes you through the actual, so you can set things up while it takes you through the tour. If at any point you say, okay, now I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I just wanted to see, you can cancel that tour and you're all fine and back to where you were. So just so that you understand that you can make use of it, and at any point if you feel like quitting the tour, not continuing, you can do so. In the meantime, you can see that our graceful switchover has completed, and those are the steps. So what happens now is that primary is running on DBV2 and standby on DBV1. How do we know that it's indeed like that? Go back to your manage configurations and you'll see that it has swapped around. This is very nifty. So let me initiate a switch back quickly so that I can continue showing you the rest of the awesome features that I've got on waiting for you. We're going to look at disaster recovery actions, and this is where I'm going to focus on the DR testing part, and then the other one is we are going to look at configuring the observer so that it can keep an eye on your primary and then act upon an emergency for you, and that is the whole purpose of auto failover. So if you have a look here, my graceful switchback is busy in progress. While we are waiting for that, earlier on I was also talking about creating support packages. Now, the reason why we have this is it makes life easy for you and for the support team. Should you run into any problems and you raise a support ticket, 9 out of the 10 times, the support engineer will request a support package. The reason is what happens here is when you provide us with that, it contains all the configuration files that was touched during that operation. It gathers all the trace files produced and it zips it up into a zip file, which we then take and we can have a detailed look into what caused your issue. And that's much easier, we find, than going back and forth or asking, can you please send us this file? Can you please attach that file? You know, eventually you spend like too much time requesting information and not actually getting down to the actual work. This is also, I'm quickly going to show you our switchback was successful. So we are back to DBV1 as our primary and DBV2 as our standby. You can also have a create support package per process that you have completed. So say for instance something went wrong here, you can click on this button, it will grab all the relevant files and you can download it to your PC or laptop and then hook it onto the ticket. So if you even go back to some of these other ones, you can see that it's got this option. So just for a bit of information as to why we've got this and where you can get it from. Okay, so now we add disaster recovery actions, and this was previously just the normal activation, but our wonderful development team has gone and extended the capability of this, and I am absolutely ecstatic about it. So you've got your normal activate now. If you're doing it manually and you're comfortable with that, then it is still there and you can see it's nice and red. So you can still do that. Then another option here is the standby read-only test. Sometimes, you know, for a DR test, someone will say, well, if I can just quickly have my standby in read-only mode and it switches back and it goes into recovery mode, that's enough for me. I've got a small little, you know, environment, so I don't have to go through extensive DR testing, etc. Then you've got this option. But the option where I want to get to is the perform DR test. You get this once in 6 months, once a year, and everybody's saying, oh my goodness, lots of work waiting for us, because what happens after a DR test? Someone has to rebuild the DR. Well, with this option, things are becoming so much more easier. So we're going to say run a DR test, but you'll see the beauty in this. You're going to be asked, do you want to make a backup of the standby database prior to the activation? This seems quite good. I'm going to say yes, please, because if I can rather put that backup back rather than having to rebuild everything afterwards, I'd rather do that. So you can choose between a backup set or an image copy. I'm going to choose an image copy. You can read about which one you prefer. Then it picks up a backup format, and then I must obviously give it a location where it can put that backup for me. So I'm going to say put it there, and then it says, do you want this process to stop before the activation takes place to verify that the backup is there? We're going to say yes. You know, you don't have to. We'll just say yes so that I can show you for demonstration purposes. And we're going to say submit. As usual, it opens up a task, and if we click on it, you'll see that it again is busy doing some stuff. So we've told the product that we want to make a backup, and we want you to pause this operation so that we can verify the backup before you activate. Okay, so this is the first stage in the DR test. Once the standby database is activated, you'll make the call to the various people who need to test, going through their test cases, checking, comparing data, etc. And then the next phase will come in where a lot of the work has been taken away from us. So you'll see it puts this task into like a little paused state here. It says this task requires user action. So it's gone and it's done the backup, and it actually did a validation of that backup. So I'm happy. Say, for example, I went to that location, saw that those image copies have been created. I'm happy that they're there. And now I'm going to say resume the DR test. Now it goes and it opens a task saying activating now. So we are now opening our standby database in read-write mode so that the relevant people can go and do their testing, and the tick can be made against the documentation saying we require a DR test every 6 months. Wonderful. You make the call to your boss and they're busy testing for an hour or two, and they come back and say, thank you very much, DBA. Now you can rebuild the DR, the standby database. In the past, you would have had to go and trash everything that's there on the standby and recreate doing the creation of the standby database again. But this is why I'm so excited for this feature. We're going to go back to disaster recovery actions, choose our configurations, and then you'll see we get some more options because we have chosen to make a backup of the standby database before the DR test. Look what happens here. It gives you the next option to reinstate, meaning putting your standby database back using the backup prior to the DR test. So this is going to make life so much easier for me. I'm going to go home early today because I've got this option. There it goes, and it finds my image copies. It says, do you want to switch to those image copies? Yes, please. I submit. It opens up a task and it takes you high level through the steps that it performs during this operation of reinstating reinstating your standby database. And you can see this is quite fast. You will do testing on your environment just to see how it is. Remember, I've got a small database, so it's quite quick. You know, if you've got bigger database, bigger load, larger archive blocks, you know, stuff like that, things will obviously increase in time. And there you can see it says my standby database is reinstated. Surely it can't be this easy. Let's go and have a look. We go to database actions. Remember what I told you, your ultimate test is always to go and manually send logs and then apply them. And if that works, that is your test to say everything is working fine. So the sending of that log, we're already at log 24. That worked. Let's apply it. Opens up the task. Wow, that was quite quick. And that is done. And you know that you've reinstated your standby database. You didn't have to recreate it, and you are off. You can also go and leave early. You don't have to sit behind and redo everything. Okay, so that takes care of the disaster recovery actions. Now, as promised, I would like to go and look at the auto failover feature. Now, as I mentioned, that we need to set up this observer so that it can monitor our configuration. And based on a couple of rules and priorities, it will then act whether it needs to initiate an activation or not. So first of all, I've got the observer process running on the same host where my central console is running, and I'm going to create an observer now for it. So I'm going to give the host where the process is running, and I've got it running on Dbvisit. It uses this port 10853. You'll find all the details in the documentation. And then we've got a little passphrase that we are using, and I say save. So there we've got the observer. This configuration is aware of the observer, and now we're going to set up based on a couple of parameters. So you see that it actually now gives you an option against your configuration to do a couple of things. So let's click on this monitor, and it opens up some basic settings. So first of all, you are going to look at the frequency the observer will check. Now, the default is 2 minutes, which is 120 seconds. And that is the minimum. We wouldn't recommend you to go beyond that. However, for our demonstration purposes, I'm going to put it to 20 seconds because we're not going to sit around and wait for 2 minutes, you know, to see how it works. Then the maximum number of communication attempts. It will do some connections and checks, and if it finds that it cannot get to your primary database within these number of tries, then of course it will initiate something. So I'm going to make ours just 3. And then you've got the modes. Remember, manual mode for testing, having dry runs, making sure that you are happy with it. And then you've got failover mode, and this is when you're in production, you've tested everything, and this is how you want to run. So we're going to say save settings. You'll see that there's some advanced settings here. This is where you enable email notification, where you set your rule priority. We're not going to look into this. I just want to demonstrate how this actually works. So at this stage, we've got our observer monitoring everything. And what I'll go and do is I will go back and I'll actually go and create an emergency. So I'm going to go to database actions, and I'm going to be naughty, and I'm going to stop my primary database. Okay. Once it is stopped, you'll see stuff happening because the observer is awake and busy looking monitoring my environment. You can see something is popping up here. Let's go back to configure manage configurations. You'll see in the alert history, this thing pops up. And it's a message to say that we at attempt 1, remember we set ours to 3 times, 3 retries, okay? There you can see we on the second attempt, so every 20 seconds it is checking, and it's going to check for 3 retries, and then it's going to go over into action. Okay, so you'll see if you now wait for it to hit 3 of 3, you see that it opens up this activating standby task. So it is actually acting to say, I've tried 3 times every 20 seconds. I've tried to contact the primary. I couldn't get to it. Please start an activation now. And that's how it has, the product is automating the activation based on the parameters that you've set. Okay, so this is high level what the observer can do for you. As mentioned, there's a lot of documentation about this. Please go and read up on it, especially with regards to the rules and the additional checks you want to make sure of. The last thing you want to do is to have false alarms that eventually get you to activate your standby database, and it was not actually required. So this takes care of the actual live demonstration. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back into the slides, and let's quickly have a look at our support. So yeah, we've got quite a bit of resources to help you. We've got our online user guide. We've got some awesome knowledge-based articles and blogs. You'll see some of our blogs have videos to help you, do stuff like upgrades, etc. And it's very helpful. Then, of course, as mentioned, you can log a ticket with our support services, where some of our, or someone from our support team will pick your ticket up and have a look at it. They're very responsive, so you're not going to wait long. We've got, as Zeke mentioned earlier, our headquarters in New Zealand, and we've got Europe office as well, so there is coverage all over. Then you can also request a proof of concept. There are some upgrade services if you want us to help you. You can purchase a package, and then there's also implementation services where we implement for you as training, or training will be part of it, and it will get you going so much quicker. And then I am going to hand over to Zeke to quickly take you through the next 2 slides, and then we are hopefully good for a couple of questions.
Thanks, Charmaine. That demo was awesome. All right. So as Charmaine mentioned, we do offer a trial version of our software and also a 2-hour test drive. If you go to our website, www.dbvisit.com, the links are really easy to spot right in the top menu bar of the website. We also have these links, the website, which I just mentioned, the blog where we post tons of updates, places we've been, different scenarios that our DBAs encounter with informative articles like implementing databases in the cloud and running a database in Docker. It's not always just about Dbvisit Standby. There's lots of cool stuff there. If you are a customer or if you do some testing, you need help, support.dbvisit.com is where you got to get that. And then for any questions, including pricing inquiries, please contact us at info@dbvisit.com. Now we're running close to the end of time. If you have any questions, please submit them in the chat window. We'll see those. We want to keep this at an hour to respect everyone's time. So if you submit a question, we will get back to you via email and we can set up a call to discuss if you'd like. Charmaine, thank you so much for doing that demo for us. It's always great to watch you walk through slides and talk through Standby. So thanks for being here with us.
It's a huge pleasure. Thank you, Zeke. I quickly see that there's 3 questions from Ajit, and they are fairly, I think I'll be able to answer them here if that's fine. The first question here is, can Dbvisit Standby support primary database on Linux while Standby on Windows? No, unfortunately not. We do not support cross-platform. So if you've got your primary on Linux, you should have your Standby on Linux as well. You can, however, have your console, central console, running on a little, separate server. So unfortunately, cross-platform, not at this stage. Does it require additional Oracle license to run on Standby site? Zeke, you can just maybe cut into a bit more regarding the licensing.
Yeah, happy to. So we license per database. We don't count sockets or cores, and as Standby has to be installed on on each primary and Standby database, the number of licenses you need is the same count as the number of primary and Standby databases you have. So good rule of thumb is that the minimum number of licenses required is a pair, because each primary requires its own unique Standby.
Cool. And these licenses Zeke is talking about is Standby or the Standby product license. So no, you're not requiring additional Oracle licenses. That you've already taken care of. Okay, the next question is, while the Standby is getting created, is the primary still up and running? Yes, absolutely. We do not touch your primary.
Oh, that's a good one.
Is it possible the user switch over option to prove my DR? So the Graceful Switchover is not really a DR operation. It is more for planned maintenance. You can use the DR test to help you, as you'll always be able to come, to get back, or you can open your Standby in read-only mode. The switchover is more, for planned maintenance. So it's very important to distinguish between activation and switch over, as there's a difference between that. Okay, wonderful, Ajit. That's a pleasure. Anytime after switch over to Standby, how long time take to return to the primary? Okay, so again, yeah, it is when you give me your database and you say, how long is a full RMAN backup going to take? It all depends on how many data files, how big are your data files, how big are your archived logs. So we usually say the amount of time that you have it's taken to switch over will be the same amount of time it will take to switch you back. And if you quickly had a look at my very small example, it was fairly the same short time. However, I do realize, and you must consider, in a production environment, it will take a little bit longer. But usually, we have guys with much bigger databases, customers with much bigger databases, and it doesn't take that long. This is a matter of really, testing it and then taking it from there and taking note of the timing. So it's difficult to say, but it's usually the same amount of time for the switch over and then the switch back. Okay, lovely. Will RMAN recognize Standby so that an archive deletion policy applied or be recognized? This one, I think I need to Yes, there are actually settings within your DDC configuration where you will, indicate that it must please check, if your archives are online. The thing is, you need to, what we have is called archive lock management module, and it works together with your backup. If you've got backups put in place to make sure that archive logs are not deleted before they are backed up, etc. So there are definitely ways to manage that so that you don't get to a scenario where archive logs are being deleted before they are, backed up, and the standby product is aware of those. I have a database 3. Hope there is no upper limit to the DB size. We've got quite, big customers out there, and this is where your transportable media comes in. The thing is, you will go and sit and have a look at the features available, and then you'll work towards this. But I can definitely recommend for a 3 terabyte database, definitely make use of transportable media. It's going to make your life so much easier. Once your database is there, the data files are on the other side, it is really the archive log, the redo rate coming through per hour, or, if your system can handle it, if your network can handle it, then you're good to go. So no limitations on that side. And we would definitely want to hear from you when you set it up, how you found it, etc. Okay, and then 40 gigs per hour it should be able to. I would definitely say try to see if you can simulate some testing. I know it's not easy to simulate 3 teras, but yes, you should not be. If you've got enough space, if you've got the resources, then our product will definitely be able to run with that. Okay. Well, I hope I was able to answer most of your questions. Thank you so much for participating and asking these questions. It's always good to know what the thinking out there is. And please get into contact with us if you've got any further questions, and we'll do our best to help. With this, I'd like to thank Zeke. Thank you for your time, and thank you for hosting me. And I would like to thank each of you for getting onto this webinar with me and seeing what wonderful stuff we've got installed in this version.
Yes, thank you all.
Wonderful. Okay, everyone, have a good day. See you later. Bye.